Welcome to the Best Tech Practices for Small Organizations podcast. This podcast is presented by NW Techs and is designed to educate small and medium-sized organizations on the best practices for managing their IT. We cover topics ranging from cybersecurity to business communication to file storage to working remotely. In this episode, we're actually starting a new series titled Law Firms and Technology. This series will be highlighting law firms from around the world and learn from their experience on the best practices for managing and utilizing technology. I have the extreme privilege of talking to Priyanka Sinha. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Taylor. Thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic. Priyanka is a co-founder and partner of an award-winning law firm, AMP Partners, based in Mumbai, India. Priyanka has experience in handling both domestic and international matters. She is trusted counsel to several large multinational and India corporations, high net worth individuals, including many business leaders and celebrities. Priyanka also takes deep interest in catering to startups, small and medium-sized enterprises, and private clients. Priyanka has developed a strong track record of successfully representing many high-profile clients in criminal and civil litigation, including in the areas of corporate, real estate, commercial disputes, construction law, labor law, security law, intellectual property, and startups, and also getting several commercial deals included. So really excited to talk to you today, Priyanka. We have a full list of questions we're going to be going through and just understanding from your experience, how have your firm utilized technology? So let's jump right into it. The first question I'd love to talk about is, what are you and maybe the rest of your firm looking forward to when it comes to technology and utilizing technology in the long run?
Yeah, so I'll jump in answering that. So Taylor, see, when COVID-19, it obviously brought the world to a halt, right? And it got a lot of challenges for every organization, every individual, and especially a startup, law firms where, we're new age firms, so to say, like it's been like 5 years that we are in the practice as a law firm. And obviously prior to that, we've had experience in different organizations. But it did throw a lot of challenges on us, but it was a rare opportunity that, as a legal industry got to use technology and in practice. Because this is something which everybody's been assessing and contemplating for a very long time. But we really jumped into the cause and tried to use technology as much as possible. And considering, new age firm, we had young generation people. They were not very averse to technology. So it wasn't really difficult for us because, the digital literacy was there in the firm. So we've tried to use it as much as possible. And I don't see this to be like an interim measure because this is going to stay for long. That's my take.
I love it. Well said. And I love the terminology you used, new age law firm. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What does that mean to you in regards to an old age law firm?
I wouldn't want to really draw that distinction between like the archaic firms or new age, but the way of dealing with especially the kind of matters that one takes up and the division of practice areas and the way of handling clients. Typically where people had like billing hours, and we as a firm, we do not really follow the practice of the hourly practice. We usually prefer working on mandates where, we're catering to from startups to we're catering to MNCs and different other corporates and different setup, so the kind of people we're catering to is from different walks of life. So that's one. Apart from that, the kind of practice area that the firm takes up is something like media and entertainment law. We do a lot of sports law work. We're doing, apart from that, we're doing a lot of startup where, we're working for the investors. We are working from a seed level, or when a startup comes to us where they've just conceptualized the idea. We also try and do a lot of brainstorming with them, which typically, I mean, if I really have to sound that way, but typically a lot of established law firms who've been in practice for like 100 years and all in India, they're now looking at taking up such kind of work. But obviously, since the fee quote, and there is this difference in fee quote, right? In a bigger law firm setup where the established, where obviously there's a change in the fee quote, where a startup law firm or a new age law firm, their fee quotes are much more reasonable for a startup to really reach out to these kind of lawyers. So that's where we draw the distinction.
Love it. That's super helpful.
Hmm.
Great. I'm going to move on to the next question. What areas of technology does your organization struggle with? What are some areas that, or maybe you have struggled with in the past and that you've overcome?
So yeah, in the past, I'll tell you. So obviously, prior to COVID, even then, there were a lot of issues with respect to having a stronger IT support in a law firm, and especially in a small or a mid-sized law firm. That's a major challenge which one comes across.
Well said. Yeah. And the clients and the law
Because there
firms
is a lot
you
of
support.
investment that you really need to do in IT, right? Because to have things in place, security, safety is a major concern.
No doubt. No doubt. So what I'm hearing is you've had to invest in more IT staff and or partners to help you take on those
That's
challenges.
correct. That's correct.
Got
Yeah.
it. Well said. Yep, and we totally can relate to that as far as serving our clients and the law firms that we support, their IT and cybersecurity needs. Is we've only had more law firms reach out to us in the past 12 months than ever.
Correct.
For that
Correct.
reason.
Yeah.
Well said.
No, so the concern which Taylor, which I have seen is a lot of people, especially in these law firms, where people didn't really see these situations coming up. A lot of law firms used to actually delegate and outsource it to third-party organizations, for IT support. But now the need of the hour, where some people have realized that also it's important to have somebody in-house. So, those deliberations, depending on the kind of setup and the size of the firm, these are concerns which people are now trying to weigh and figure out how to really deal with the IT support. Because now technology is, you can't do without it, right? So that way.
Most definitely. Yep. Well said. Do you notice like a certain kind of diving deeper into that question as far as internal versus external IT support? Have you seen where is the sweet spot? Like when do you need to be like, hey, let's go internal versus external? Or is it just case by case? Is there like a certain size organization that you've
So
seen of
I
like,
think,
yeah.
yeah. So for the budget of the firm, if your budget of the firm where you can afford somebody to have permanently in-house, nothing like it. But for certain firms where they really consider for a time being, where they think we can have like an annual package or something where we can have and outsource it to somebody which is a reasonable cost. To start with, I don't see that to be a problem as long as you have your documentation in check. And you should not, considering law firms deal with like very privileged and confidential information, right? With the kind of clientele you must be having and all of that. So it shouldn't backfire. You really need to have your document and checks and balances in place. Apart from that, I don't see there to be a concern if you're really outsourcing it, but one needs to be really sure on that front. Or else and if you can afford and have a good budget, then have somebody in-house. That's my take.
Love it. That makes total sense, and that's super helpful. Cool. Let's move on to the next question here. What, from a technology standpoint, does your team need to work in a physical office, or are people free and encouraged to work remotely?
So currently, we are working on a hybrid system where on a need basis where people are there in office and they're working physically from office. But on most occasions where, you can manage matters and you can work from home and, access through like VC hearings and all. So it's a hybrid model that we're following, but maybe even like a few months back, when we were in entire lockdown, or it was entirely VC hearing, we weren't really exploring the option of physical being present in office.
Makes sense. Great. Yeah, and I know you have our previous conversation we had before this podcast. You mentioned you guys are multinational and you guys serve Australia and other countries.
That's
Tell me
correct.
about,
Yeah.
and it was really interesting talking to you about the court systems and how they're virtual. Can you dive a little bit
Right.
more into that as far as where do you see it going as far as being able to serve clients virtually and then court hearings being virtual? Do you think it's going to be a hybrid model? Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I'll take up on the judiciary aspect with how the situation spanned out when with the whole COVID situation. So the courts initially, when this whole thing came up, they came up with guidelines, and with the video conferencing rules had come up, how they would run the courts across, like High Court, Supreme Court, and that's been functioning really well. And the access, which you can really be at one place and have like 5 devices in place, and log into different systems and have an access through. That's a brilliant way to really, we never saw this coming. So that's a brilliant opportunity which has come our way. And now, that's convenience is what we talk about. And, yeah, having said that, if you really ask me now, okay, with respect to meetings, how, would I still prefer a virtual meeting or a face-to-face meeting? I can say this convenience is definitely there when it comes to virtual meetings, but there's nothing like a face-to-face meetings. I don't think it can ever replace face-to-face meetings, because the kind of body language that you have, that you can really get a cue from the other person while you're in a face-to-face meeting, and you'll also get the understanding of how the audience is reciprocating and receiving your message. That's something which you can only do it, have a better understanding in a face-to-face meeting. Similarly, like even when matters are going in court and you're advancing an argument where the judge is making a note, while you're doing it physically, you can actually see whether which page you're referring to, whether you can really navigate the judge through exactly the same page and be at the same point, right? Which becomes a little difficult while you're on a virtual hearing. So that's the concern I see.
Fascinating. Thanks for sharing. And I know our last conversation, you mentioned that you are looking, you mentioned talking about having, some of the meetings virtual, but,
Right.
some of maybe the administrative meetings. Can you talk a little
Right.
about that of like, maybe, 25% of the meetings be in person where you're meeting with a client,
Correct.
but then
Correct.
more of the administrative and less relationship building. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So also that, and also a lot of time. You don't really waste your time in addressing connectivity issues. So that's there. That's on a lighter note.
Unmute yourself.
But
yeah.
yeah, I think that's something which has been going on, right? But yeah,
Totally.
also something which, Taylor, I wanted to mention to you, even for the courts, what they've been addressing, which is fascinating, is they've come up with like e-filing and e-hearings and all of that, which is brilliant because you can do all your filings. It's convenient and it's cheap. Because obviously there's less paperwork, considering how litigations are, where the kind of paperwork where you're filing in volumes, which is in multiple volumes. It's obviously a lot of cost involved, which is something which you can cut down on a virtual hearing. So that's something which I would also want to highlight.
Makes sense. Yeah. That's great. Priyanka, I'm gonna move on to the next question here. Tell me about what are your favorite tools or technology solutions? So like if it's Zoom or Slack or a password manager, what is like a tool where you're just like, oh my gosh, I cannot live without this tool. It saves me so much time. I love it.
Yeah. So to start with, I think Zoom's really taken over us, right? I mean, we can't really, and that's exactly what we are using currently as well. So, yeah, I think that's something you can't do without. And similarly, like the Cisco and, Microsoft Teams and all of that, like Google Meet and all, which we use. But apart from that, there are some other technologies which like all the collaborative technology, like use of like the online courts and e-libraries, and using digital signatures. Now these convenience, I mean, I think it's something which has always been around, but it's never been used so rampantly, right? Like a case management system, it's always been there. It's been there for a while now. I mean, these softwares have been around for about, like, to my knowledge, more than 10 years, right? So 10, 15 years, but people are now using these. I mean, because obviously now it's convenient. So that's something. There are several other technology and software which everyone's using, but these are like really, really even. As law firms, I'll tell you, we're using technology now for record keeping, for even billing system, like
Mm.
a lot of administrative stuff which is also done through technology these days. So
Su-
that's something which is really helping us currently, because you don't need to be, even you don't need to really have like reach out to your accountant all the time to get things done, because they are using technology, and it's all on one click, right? You have every information there readily available in front of you.
So good. Love it. Tell me about you piqued my curiosity as far as like electronic signatures. I know here in the United
Correct.
States, a lot of jurisdictions or corporations or regulators won't accept electronic signatures. What's that
Mm-hmm.
like in the jurisdictions you serve? Are electronic signatures becoming more acceptable versus ink signatures?
See, with COVID happening, a lot of filings even in court, where people did use like a scanned version of a signature or the e-signature, and they affixed it, because obviously you can't really have physical filings, right? So with e-filings, these things are now and under major acceptability. So even with agreements where people have been exchanging it over an email, and that gets covered under the IT Act, because that provides for the same validity, because these agreements are enforceable in nature. So all of that
Hmm.
acceptability is there nowadays, because people have realized that they can't really wait for it to happen, and if a transaction
Hmm.
needs to close, it has to close. So I think that's the reason why these technologies are playing like very important role, even as lawyers for that matter. I'll tell you, Taylor. So like two people sitting on different sides can really edit a document right away, right? So
Hmm.
these are convenient mechanisms. You don't need to sit across each other and then close on documents. You can do all of that. So closing transactions and other vetting of documents, these have become really convenient in today's time and age, I believe.
I love it. Wow, that's yeah, even though this past year, 12 months have been extremely challenging, it sounds like
Correct.
it's pushed uh the technology transformation into a whole new world of just being able
Definitely,
to.
definitely.
It's
I think
super cool.
COVID's really given a rare opportunity. It's always been there, but
Hmm.
I think, but the magnitude of this change which COVID has brought, I don't think it would have happened otherwise. At one stroke, I don't see it would have really happened without. I mean, I shouldn't be saying it, but yeah, it really took us a pandemic
Yeah.
to accept such a change, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Yep. And I've been working in the technology field for over 10 years, and I didn't change was very slow. I think Microsoft
Right.
came out with a study earlier this year that in 2020 we had almost 5 years of transformation, of just things
Hmm.
progressing so much quicker.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
to your point, I think this there's definitely been the silver lining to all of this is it's definitely pushed us to embrace these
Correct.
new forms of technology that were already there, but maybe the protocols or the standards by which we adhere to them, we just opened up the doors and be like, okay, let's utilize it now, because we have to. We have no
Correct.
other choice.
Yeah, yeah.
Super
There's no
good.
other way. I mean, one needs to be agile in today's time and age. Otherwise, it's very difficult to function, I believe. I mean, you may have all the intellect and everything, but you can't if you're not agile and if you're not adapting to the situation. It's really difficult. And that's where I would again like to highlight, when new age law firms are more open to embracing such kind of technology and change, because they're more adaptable that way. It's more difficult,
Mhm.
I would say. That's where, because digital literacy comes in, and the younger lot is more not averse to technology. So I think that really helps in a setup like that.
Fantastic. Yeah, that makes sense, and super cool. Great. Let's move on to the next question. Tell me about, since COVID, Are you
Hmm.
serving the same clients in the same regional areas, or has that change expanded or contracted? Are you serving the same regional areas, same countries, or have you expanded it? And what's your thoughts moving forward?
So we with the clientele, the domestic clientele is pretty much the same. With
Okay.
international clientele, a lot of people did have concerns where they reach out to us, but I wouldn't say there was any sort of expansion or contraction. So that way, the reach out to clientele has been the same. So that's how I would like to maintain the standard.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. I know for our organization, the ability to serve clients in new regions and new areas has just increased so much, mostly because the playing field has all been levelized, right? It doesn't matter
Correct.
if you're down the
Right.
street or 6,000 miles away, people want
Right.
outcomes and
I
they, and
think transactions have
yeah.
really increased.
Okay.
Transactions because people have been, but with courts functioning initially when they started, it was more of an experimental way of, taking up few matters a day, few courtrooms functioning in a day. So I wouldn't say that the reach was more because of litigation. I wouldn't say that, but
Okay.
transactions, yeah, but it did take a pause for a little while till, all of us figured that, yeah, this is the new normal, like we kept saying, and we need to function. And when the acceptability came in, so yeah, it's pretty much the same. I would like to keep it that way.
Love it. Great. Great. And next question I have for you is, in the past 12 months, have you been spending more on your technology solutions, or were you already had all your tools in place? Have your expenses increased? Your investment in technology increased in the last
Yes,
12
I
months?
would. Yes, we have. So a lot of, like I said, paperwork, right? So although as a firm where, we did have all physical copies and we started maintaining,
Mm,
because now, even before COVID, some of the tribunals over here started accepting e-filing and documents
okay.
over, in different formats like a PDF, Acrobat, Adobe and all. But with COVID coming in, you needed every file, every litigation. So if you have a matter which is listed tomorrow, you will have to be prepared. So you need all the information, all the documents readily available at one place. So we did start investing on all the documents, all the litigation matters. We started putting them on a server where, anybody from the firm could access it. So that was some sort
Mm,
of an investment which was done, where we started maintaining those records which were readily accessible to everybody. Case management and all of that we started maintaining. There were certain tools, billing tools we started implementing. So yeah, on those lines we did. And yeah, those were the investments that we've carried out during COVID.
very, very good. Any thoughts on those investments as far as ones that you want to change? Like, the billing system is working great, but we want to move to something else, or the file storage system is great, but we want to move to something else, or is everything humming along to your desire?
So far so good, but I think it can just get better because I didn't
Mm.
see this day arriving, honestly. So I'm
No,
really
no one
hoping for
did.
things to change, and I'm really looking forward to more changes coming in. I really don't
Well,
want to settle with what's going on currently, so I'm looking forward to more changes, definitely.
I love it. That's a great mindset. Fantastic. I got another question here around cybersecurity. We've seen an exponential increase in cybercrime in the past 24 months, even
Right,
even
right.
pre-COVID. What are your thoughts on data security, and how is your firm combating cybersecurity?
Yeah, so like I said, so we've now invested in having things in place. I'll be very honest. Initially, we when we started off, we had we entered into a contract with somebody and outsourced it to somebody, had
Mm,
agreements in place. But again, as a law firm, there's a lot of privileged and confidential information. You can't really afford to have a third party until unless you have your checks and balances and you really know where, and you own the server where you're
mm,
maintaining all of that. You can't have it on a third party server because there are threats which you can, and then obviously there's loss of data and the kind of, and with clientele, it's all word of mouth in the industry, right? With the legal industry, it's all word of mouth. So you can't really afford to lose clientele at such a crucial stage of your career. So that's something where I really think it's very important for a law firm to ensure the person and how you're doing it, and but you can't do without maintaining it. That's very important, because with cybersecurity is something which everybody really needs to pay heed to.
Couldn't agree more. How is it from the judicial standpoint or from the government standpoint? Do they have requirements for law firms to manage their cybersecurity a certain way, or is it kind of up to you to decide the best practices
Not
for
really.
cybersecurity?
There's no particular mandate which is there, which makes it mandatory for law firms to maintain it in a certain format, or there are no rules laid down as such. But it's more of a practice, and that people are now really indulging into such practices, that they want to have things in place, because even clients are smarter. In today's time and age, where you're not catering to a regional client, you're catering to clients all across the world. So people are smart, and they don't want your data to be let out anywhere out in the open. So that's where one needs to be very careful and cautious.
Well said. Well said. To wrap us up here, Priyanka, I love on our previous conversation, we talked about you implementing WhatsApp in India, the first law firm to do that. Tell me about that. I think our listeners would love to hear that.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting perspective. So it was one such matter, which was almost about like 4 years back, which was listed in Bombay High Court. And it was a party who was not in the same city, who was in a different place, and we were not able to reach through the party a day before the matter, and it was really difficult. And thankfully the judge was deciding on the matter. He was very progressive on that, and he said, how in today's time and age you can't reach out to and find another party and serve a copy. So it did help us to use technology at that point. We used apps like WhatsApp and a few other apps to reach out, served a copy of the notice, served the summons by way of WhatsApp. And ever since then, that's been a settled practice, and the same has been followed by other courts across India and internationally. So that's something which we take the credit to our firm, that thankfully it was that push at that point to really accept technology, and in a way give away the practice of just serving by way of registered post, or typically all that's laid down in the procedural laws. So thankfully we could really accept and accept that kind of norm to serve it by way of WhatsApp. And now like we serve it by way of emails and then have a read receipt and all. But WhatsApp's quite a change, which I think you can't do without in today's time and age, because communications really taken over that.
Well said. Yeah, I think, and I love your perspective on just that forward thinking. I think the law firms I talk to, our clients, and even just other industries, you being like, hey, what if we use WhatsApp, right? And just that forward thinking of outside the box thinking obviously produce great results for you, and will continue to produce great results for your law firm. Well, thanks, Priyanka. This has been a great conversation. I'm so happy to have you on here. And thanks for everyone for listening to the Best Tech Practices for Small Organizations podcast. It's presented by NW Techs. To learn more about NW Techs and how we help small organizations tackle IT and cybersecurity challenges, go visit us at nwtex.com. And thanks for listening.